Hi, this is Matt Wright from Gaia. We're leveraging open source AI to build transparent, censorship-resistant cell phone knowledge systems. And you've turned into the Edge of Show, where we unlock the future Web3 and AI every week. Stay tuned.
Hello, Web3 and AI podcast passengers. Jump on in. Here's what's to come on today's journey. Discover how opaque black box AI systems jeopardize intellectual property and foster mistrust, and why our guest is determined to change the game. Learn how Gaia's groundbreaking decentralized model is redefining transparency and setting a whole new standard for ethical AI. And finally, hear our guest's bold vision for a future where AI empowers users while still protecting intellectual property. All this and more, take your seat.
Welcome to the Edge of Show, your gateway to the Web3 revolution. We explore the cutting edge of blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs, ordinals, DeFi, gaming, and entertainment, plus how AI is reshaping our digital future. Join us as we bring you visionaries and disruptors pushing boundaries in this digital renaissance. This show is for the dreamers, disruptors, and doers that are pumped about where innovation meets culture. This is where the future begins.
Welcome to the Edge of Show, featuring a variety of top-notch guests and other hosts. Today is a special AI edition, and I'm Ron Levy. I'll be your host today. It's another production of the Edge of Company, a quickly growing media ecosystem which empowers and the pioneers of Web3 tech and culture. Edge of Company is also responsible for other groundbreaking endeavors like the Outer Edge Innovation Festival in LA and in Riyadh. Today's episode features Matt Wright, and he is CEO of Gaia, leading innovation and decentralized AI. Previously, he co-founded EVM Capital, served as director of Consensus, and played a key role at JP Morgan, expanding Quorum's global reach. With over 150 hackathons organized for Fortune 500 companies, Matt champions startup culture, strategic partnerships, and technology advancements all across industries. So Gaia is an innovative, decentralized AI platform that transforms knowledge into a secure, collaborative ecosystem. It empowers developers to create and monetize AI agents while promoting transparency and rewarding knowledge creators. By addressing issues like censorship and bias, Gaia fosters an inclusive environment for innovation and knowledge sharing, redefining the future of AI. So, Matt, it is a pleasure to have you on here. It's good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, can you
Amazing.
share a bit about your journey into the world of AI and blockchain and sort of what sparked your interest in the fields?
Yeah, of course. So I started my career in corporate innovation and developer communities. I used to organize hackathons in 65 different countries around the world. We were a small company called Angel Hack at the time. We essentially did hackathons for Fortune 500 companies like MasterCard, Motorola, Barclays, UBS. Bunch of the early Web 2 stack that you would kind of see at the hackathons we were working with. Around that time, I actually got into blockchain. I think around like 2015, we were organizing a hackathon for blockchain, and that was kind of the first time I drank the Kool-Aid and jumped down the rabbit hole. Wanting to know what decentralized and open source technologies meant for the world. And I think exploring that, it really was taking kind of all of my philosophies of like how I interpret life as I know it and technology to being something that's holistic and can create decentralized value systems. For me, I went head first. I just wanted to build in that ecosystem, and then shortly after, ironically, I got picked up by JP Morgan, and the reason I jumped in was they were taking Ethereum and forking it and making it work for banks, enterprises, financial service companies, governments, all in open source. And so, although JP Morgan, we were definitely leading the charge in open source in the enterprise world, and to be honest, like in still some of the major technologies you see in the space, in the Web3 space today. And then at Consensus, that project was acquired by Consensus in 2020. So I jumped in and wanted to work on this internet of value. I was absolutely enamored with the Ethereum ecosystem and what people wanted to build in the space, how we saw, the development of this internet of value. And through my experience there, which was also quite interesting in itself, I was initially building out developer, community teams at Consensus across our entire stack. And then I got really into, of course, NFTs, DeFi, but DAOs really struck a chord with me. Being a dev community person my entire career, I saw what decentralized communities or organizations, could do for the space, and seeing that the autonomous piece wasn't really built out yet, there was some huge opportunities to grow. So I did some work in DAOs for Consensus, and then my last stint was building out a corporate accelerator program inside of Consensus called Fellowship. We were basically helping seed stage teams, that raised capital, build alongside MetaMask and Linea in a more structured approach, providing developer feedback to our core engineering team. And that was a huge success. I also got to battle test some ideas that I had around kind of this thesis around future of work that I've been, talking about for the past, 2 years, on like if we are building this autonomous value system over the internet, how do we sustain ourselves with kind of the bureaucratic processes and recursive processes we see in Web3? Like if you're a power user of Web3, like is it not annoying that we have to monitor the volume of transactions we're doing on a daily basis, monitor like the amount of projects that are coming out, and different metrics on how those projects are performing, the governance of some of these token communities that we own, or like the work we do inside of them is just absolutely noisy and cumbersome. And so I was working on this idea of how do we automate a lot of those processes to make our interaction with Web3 more abstracted, just to be more automated. And from there, I partnered with Byte Trade over in Singapore. They're building out the initial kind of MVP of Gaia. It was kind of one of those big aha moments where I literally flew out to see these guys. The next day, I looked at their GitHub, and we basically aligned on how we would take open source AI infrastructure with Web3 Rails into kind of the mainstream. And so it's been a big adventure this past year. I think my what drives me in this space is open source, decentralization, and I see decentralization on the legal or structuring components, the technology and network components, and then also the economics of these systems. And so I think Gaia is this amazing opportunity for us to take what we've seen working in open source AI and enable us to validate and monetize some of this this compute in a Web3 world. So it's my story.
There was a lot there, and I think what comes to me a little bit is you came to decentralization and the true value of it by going through corporations, right? JP Morgan being the biggest bank in this country and the second biggest bank in the world, from what I recall, and Consensus being possibly the number one company in, maybe measured over the last 10 years in crypto space. And then let's touch on Web3. Instead of giving a big long description, I think Web3 is the ability to exchange value unlike we ever could in the past. And that, to me, empowers individuals and smaller companies in a way that they've never been able to in the past. And so I want to frame all that to say how you are the right guy to be working on this and developing this, because you've been on both sides and you've seen that difference. And we're going to cover kind of, that was a great backstory on Gaia and how it came to be with you involved in it. We're going to cover kind of what that means and what it is. But let's start with black box AI systems. Can you explain sort of what they are and why they pose risk to IP protection and public trust? Because that's foundational, I think, for the conversation.
Yeah, and I won't go into too much detail on what exactly they are, because I think that's kind of why we call them a black box. We, meaning the AI industry, don't know exactly what is going on. Some might know more than others, but it is the concept that as these big tech, big AI companies are training models, leveraging models inside of kind of AI infrastructure that we use, like a ChatGPT, for example. It is communicated to us that they are not using our data, that they're in charge of our safety, they're in charge of making sure that AI is doing the right things. But there is this concept of there being a black box, or an area where they aren't able to know exactly where some of the AI outputs are coming from, or like what exactly is the thing thinking 100%. It's like knowing a human as like a friend, but like not actually being inside their head 100%, and
It's
knowing
kind of like
exactly
in the
what they're
Web 2
thinking.
world, all the companies, large companies that are collecting our data, we know they're collecting it, but we don't know what the heck they're doing with it. This is kind of a
Yeah,
similar analogy for Web 3.
it's similar, but even more like meta, because like um, you know some people inside of an organization may know where the data is, and perhaps like what the format of the data is. In this situation, if we really want like authentic or organic thinking of a AI or AGI system, it's that general intelligence is like really hard to understand kind of where it's coming from. They have a general idea of how the large language models and a lot of the um, infrastructure is working, but again, like there's a difference between like asking someone a question and knowing kind of what they're thinking, but not actually being able to see like if there's something they're hiding, in their mind. And so, there's that component of AI that in decentralized AI we will face similar risks. I think what we're trying to do with Gaia is build more transparent systems that have more programmability around people training these agents, and really being able to use smart contracts and blockchains to track who's providing the IP, and how do you exchange this knowledge with and pay for it with the righteous owner. In the centralized AI world, we don't know exactly um, we don't know that the architecture is being trained or not on certain pieces of data that we're contributing to these systems, and by us not getting any recognition for that or monetization of that, it's created a lot of IP and legal concerns with bigger companies and media companies. There's like New York Times and I believe Washington Post are both like suing OpenAI, because OpenAI apparently is training all these large language models on hundreds of years of media content, and they're not being credited or paid for that. And so there's some like major IP breaches that will continue to happen. It's also just this massive gray area of like what is public, what is not, and how is this entity using that data. That's kind of this black box um, word.
Yeah, deep issues and deep problems, and some will have some solutions, but some will unfortunately just be open-ended questions. Are there ways that an organization can ensure that they are using AI responsibly, while navigating, challenges posed by the black box models that you just described?
Yeah, so we're approaching in a way, we believe open source is always the right path. I think there's two major philosophies in technology. There's closed systems and open, and regardless of like if it's blockchain and Web3 or AI, like this has been a conversation since the advent of the internet. And we're on the camp that you want to have open source distribution of large language models and AI tooling, and even AI inference is kind of like what we specialize in. And what that means is that we can talk to developers in the open to improve the models, create governance systems around these models and tooling, create ways to incentivize developers for contributing to these systems. Instead, in centralized AI, because nothing is programmed with smart contracts. We're not able to really we're not able to use a lot of primitives that help us track what is being contributed to the systems and how do we govern them, how do we monetize them. But we are able to do that with Web3.
Right. And that's where the distrust comes from. This really becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to know where all that information derived from in the beginning. There's opaque AI systems. I think they help contribute to mistrust among users and stakeholders, particularly in some sensitive industries. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, maybe, can you ask that one more time?
How do opaque AI systems contribute to mistrust among users and stakeholders, particularly in sensitive industries?
Yeah, so I think as you're building technology for, like if you're building AI for like a healthcare provider, for example, you're always going to have major privacy concerns on how that data is being used. You're going to have major, legal concerns around how the large language model was trained, how much can be controlled. Is it, crawling through some internal documentation and learning and putting it in some, in some black box that you don't know about, or perhaps it's just continuing to train the model without these folks even knowing. Those are concerns that like the industry widely is having to deal with. The way we're approaching it is, we don't want to custody anyone's data. We want to enable anybody to become their own AI company, so they can handle their own privacy concerns, their own permissioning, their own governance, and even like think through how these things are monetized. And so what we're offering for folks is to help them become their own AI company, instead of just giving them an API endpoint that they can use, and gives kind of this golden key to like access all of their data. We see that being a huge problem with enterprise. We also see that being a big issue with Web3 protocols that have rich on-chain and off-chain data that they're just sitting on. And right now, a lot of them are enabling AI by using OpenAI API as their endpoint to build kind of agentic workflows off of their data. But they might not understand that they're actually feeding this AI system with this data, whether OpenAI says they're not training their systems on it or not. And not to keep digging at OpenAI, like I think they've done tremendous work. I use ChatGPT, but like them and the Anthropics of the world, like they're building great software, but we just don't know exactly like what they're using this data for. They also are accountable for kind of the privacy and permissioning and governance, and really should not be left up to the hands of a select few. Not to mention a select few who might not understand the actual industry that they're working in. What you want to do is enable a company to manage it themselves.
Yeah, you mentioned healthcare, for instance, and there's been lots of projects in the blockchain world that have the goal was to empower people with their own healthcare data, right? Get every doctor's appointment and every medication and everything you've ever done, and be able to put that on your own personal blockchain and give permissions for other doctors or even researchers, if you choose, to have access to that data, but you would solely be the one in charge of letting people through that door. That was always sort of an end goal for blockchain, which you probably know better than I if it actually was ever truly happened. But I feel like it's kind of been leapfrogged into what you're talking about. So with Gaia, we can have our own agent, so to speak, put all that information in. And while that's not blockchain in itself, it is in an ecosystem we control completely. Whereas if it is in a large language model developed and controlled by others, somewhat in a black box, we're not going to know if they're using that data or not using that data. There's just no way to know. So you're talking about being able to separate that and control it ourselves and do with it what you will. And I would even say that would include corporate information. A lot of people are using GPT for information they wouldn't otherwise give to anybody else, right? Yet they are putting it into a big company to to pick into it as they choose, and maybe they don't realize that, or it's this nascent development of public AI to where people are willing to overlook it. So maybe you just speak to that commentary in regard to Gaia and help form that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll take this opportunity to kind of unbundle what Gaia is. Gaia, we're building living knowledge systems. We are taking open source large language models, anything you can find in Hugging Face. There's about 1.2 million open source LLMs right now out there. A lot of them are like fine-tuned or RAG enabled, like they're trained for a specific context. But it's a big amount. Like imagine there was about 500,000, I think, in like August. So a very short period of time, we have doubled the amount of open source large language models. And if you look at the proliferation of open source software in the early internet days, fast forward to today, speaking to like Linux and MySQL and Apache, the whole like OS stack in open source, that runs a lot of the world's infrastructure, whether we know it or not. Like most people, most like an average person on this earth probably has no idea what the hell Linux is. Yet it powers the various components on an airplane and like medical devices and the way our transportation systems work. And so what we're looking at is how do you take that massive push for large language models and open source, and how do we leverage that into an ecosystem where people can take their own knowledge and build AI agents with that kind of scale. And so we offer a suite of we offer developer framework. We can basically take your own knowledge, build your own agent, and we basically vectorize the data or turn it to a bunch of ones and zeros, so the large language model can operate. And essentially, what you end up with is you end up with an agent that is trained on a very specific context and can answer like very specific inputs. And we're having a network of these where they can start talking to each other. And essentially, if you're the owner of that agent, you can monetize that data, that training. You can have various nodes or agents that are trained on their own unique skill sets or knowledge. And so we create a very resilient network of, at some point you can have a very resilient network of GPTs that are, not censored by, one big company. They're not, biased through the training and needed to go through some sort of application process. And they're monetized peer to peer. So you can offer this to a service to your own users, to your own developer community, to the network widely. And so we're entering this era of the internet where, we had the read internet with HTML. We had read write with Web 2, where you can now, be the content. With the advent of cookies and JavaScript, we could essentially have your Facebooks, your Googles, your Yelps of the world, where commenting becomes the content, or posting videos becomes the content. And then we had Web 3, which enabled this internet of value, where we can exchange digital assets across the internet that represent information. And then now we're entering this read, write, earn, and think internet, where you can have internet native agents that are able to analyze, produce some sort of context, compute some decision making, and then execute that on internet rails that have already existed. And so that's pretty wild. We already have some agents with some partners that can run a hackathon. They can run their own payment system. They can basically decide on putting together an initiative and go and collect capital and execute the distribution of capital. So there's some really cool things that are happening with this kind of knowledge economy. But that's what we're working on.
So at present, if I understand it correctly, Gaia has launched. Who today is its prime user or customer? And then the next question is going to be, who do you see it as down the road, whether it's 6 months or 6 years? But who is it today?
Yeah. Today it's developers, but more specifically, it's we see it in two ways. We see developers that have knowledge base or IP or some sort of likeness that they can build an agent around. So we have folks that are like we built a Vitalik virtual twin where it's trained on all his blogs. We've built like agents for Gary Vee, like based on his like Twitter feeds. And again, this isn't just a bot. This is a like a large language model agent. So it can actually have very dynamic thinking and analysis of decision making, and then it's it's also because of that autonomous kind of thinking, it can also go and do additional functionalities or applications. So the second path of who we're talking to are developers that can build integrations, plugins, apps, kind of on top of those things. So if you can imagine, you have like a Gary Vee agent, and it's trained on all Gary Vee's Twitter, but then you can go and ask the agent, hey, I'm going to go launch an NFT project. Do you want to collaborate with me? And you can basically, build a project with, virtual twin Gary Vee, and, share proceeds or some of the allocation to that agent. And it could be like the CEO of a project. And so we're going to see a world very quick where, based on our own knowledge, these agents are going to be able to go and create content, create new works, create digital assets, manage digital assets, run projects like on our behalf, or perhaps like just on their own accord. And so, how do we use blockchains and smart contracts to program a system where the more positive things they do in that system, the more they get rewarded to do more work, or perhaps like, so that we don't get extracted upon and that we're still valuable to these agents. How do we monetize those systems so that, you and I could have like an army of agents that like do all these tasks for us, but they come and bring home the bacon, like, help us get paid for that, the training, for that knowledge, for those new works.
If we hit sort of Vitalik and Gary Vee as the two examples you brought up, did they participate in the generation of that product you described with them on it? Or are they just blindly receiving benefits from it without having physically or themselves participated?
Yeah, so Gary Vee, yes. Vitalik, short answer is no. We are connected with the Ethereum Foundation folks, but that was more of a light experiment. I think what will happen is, as we start deploying agents and folks are using IP that may not be theirs, I think there's going to be two things that happen. One is the inference, like inference being like the actual knowledge base or the embeddings that are created for the agent, the brain of it, essentially. It's pretty lightweight, and those things we can validate inside of a network. And so if you think about like YouTube, for example, you go and Google, you go YouTube, like how to make a sandwich, and you see like dozens of videos, and some have like 2 likes and they're, crappy reviews, but you see one that's like verified and has like a ton of views, good comments. We'll likely see a world where inference will be validated if like the actual person is kind of checked into the project, like they are officially involved, or there's some like there's some routing to their wallet, because these are open systems and they're uncensorable. Like it's going to be a lot harder for someone to come in and be like, hey, this person's using my IP and I'm not getting paid for it. The only other way to go about it would be we would need to incentivize for the righteous owners of that IP to be rewarded. And so, there will be a need for kind of monitoring a lot of that. But the fact is, it's a lot more programmable than you have in centralized AI. Centralized AI, there's no system for that. It's really just throw in the lawyers. In decentralized systems, you have to incentivize that good behavior, and we think that you're gonna see like thousands of Vitalik AI agents on the internet, but the ones that are actually using his knowledge for the right reasons and are verified are likely going to be the ones that kind of float to the surface and are most used.
It just opens up this whole huge world, and I'll bring it down to the individual. If you're a parent and you've got kids, and you will make the assumption your kids will outlive you by many, many years, and then they'll have kids, and you want your way of thinking to live on and forever, much as a photograph has in the past. You can actually, a great grandkid can query that ancestor, I'll call it, for how they thought, and even throw them an issue and get an answer that was programmed on how they thought. This just opens up this world that it's just mind expanding. I don't even know how to describe it, but you're
Kind of
blazing
wild.
trails. And maybe I want to go from the realization of all that and everything you've talked about. Gaia obviously is just a monster project effort that it's taken on. Man, how do you? I guess what you need to do is, on the one hand, realize the flaws of centralized AI and problems that exist with that, and try and, number one, not replicate those problems, and number two, maybe become a solution to those problems within Gaia's projects and the way it thinks and operates, right? So it's such an all-encompassing mental burden to build the way you are. I don't know if there's an exact question in there, but AI is not an exact question, so maybe you can speak to it.
I've got a good answer for you. I think it's a lot. Like what we're trying to go up against some pretty big titans in the space. And I think where we think our edge is because we're leveraging open source and already existing primitives like Ethereum as a blockchain. We don't have to start from scratch. Like we're actually orchestrating a lot of the pieces that already exist into a network that enables people to have more ownership of AI systems and their own knowledge. And so the way we're building our kind of go-to-market and our engineering roadmap, we do everything with developer first mentality. And so we want to get these agents and these nodes out into the market as fast as possible. We want to explore all the use cases, and then we're not trying to build all the use cases. We're trying to get in touch with those use cases and understand what are the burning priorities for their use case to work, and what doesn't exist in our open source stack already that we can prioritize for that to be enabled. And so we did this fully autonomous hackathon this past week, and tomorrow is our demo day of sorts, more like the final, the closing ceremony. But we had 40 projects building AI agents in a matter of a week, and it was a really cool sprint to see what people are interested in building on our network. But then we also worked with, I would say, like 15 other partners on that either offer like wallet integration to Web3 or again, governance components. So like how do we either vote what the agent can do, or how does the agent vote for what it can do? There's also like identity and reputation systems that people were building on for these agents, and the frameworks themselves. And so by putting it out there in front of developers, we were actually able to get a lot of rich feedback on what their priorities are and kind of what things need to be built. And that's continued just to drive a roadmap. That's been my career for a decade, is really just putting code out there and having developers tell us, hey man, this sucks. Like I need this to actually do what I want to do. And let that guide your engineering roadmap instead of, we've seen a lot of other projects focus a lot on the research and development that could take to infinity, like, what these agents can do. And we allow that the big players building large language models like Meta, we use a lot of Llama 3 in our systems. And Llama is the biggest open source LLM that comes from Meta. And we enable them to do a lot of that heavy research on the AI piece. And then for us, we're able to just get that to developers and see what works. And then see how we prioritize, again, like the tooling and the infrastructure.
So for all the listeners, those of us in the industry and developers in particular, which I want to make clear, I am not, But if you've never been to a hackathon, which is hard for people in the industry to imagine because most people have been to a lot of them, but the vast majority of people have never been to a hackathon. But you want to learn about this technology, go to one. Now, a lot of them are online, but go to a physical one, just be in the room for a day and listen to the way these people ask questions, think about things. These developers that sometimes can be very young up to quite old, they will ask questions of the people running the hackathon for direction on what direction they should chart. And it is absolutely phenomenal. So when you say hackathons and what you're involved in, I think that's been a large part of your personal learning as well, being involved in so much that's helping you really, really push through. And with that, I want to get into ethical standards a little bit. But how do industry leaders collaborate to establish, these new ethical standards effectively? Because I think that's a pretty tough one.
Yeah, so like in centralized AI, they have their approach. I think there's a lot of boards and committees that are aligning on governments aligning to how AI will be integrated in the systems, and sure, there's industry industry specific groups that are helping align how AI is trained, how it's permissioned into certain systems, how it's how much access it's allowed to gain into certain companies. From our side, on the decentralized AI side, there's not we've only engaged really kind of blockchain alliances for ethical AI. We're working with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and even Microsoft on like how we look at ethical technology. Microsoft being very supportive of the field, and NYU we're working with as well. We're thinking of how do we implement standards or protocols inside of the decentralized AI field of coordinating the moving pieces of like large language models, the open source developer tooling. We're looking at proof of inference, which is kind of what we focus on. Like there's three major approaches. How do we align on which ones really support kind of the development of our space? And I think the actual like research of like the ethical side of AI or large language model development. I think the centralized AI space will start having a bit of a voice there, but so far it's really early. And I'll be honest, like decentralized AI, even though it's massive in the crypto space right now, we're peanuts compared to like the open AIs and the Anthropics of the world. There's so much going on in big AI, in open source AI that doesn't touch a blockchain. But on the centralized world, we're still very, very early, and we're not heavily involved in the large language model components of how these things are built. I think we will start to get into that narrative with some of these large implementers of the technology, but right now we're really just distributing and orchestrating all these moving pieces.
Well, when we get to ethical standards, which there's a lot of what you described as a lot of self-policing within the industry, which I think is fantastic, by the way. Not perfect, but neither is regulatory agencies, right? They do what they can do in all respects, but it is being self-policed now, which is great. But let's get into the regulatory world a little bit. Now, the regulatory bodies, they had a lot of trouble keeping up with blockchain, and as quick as things were changing, they have to be a little more methodical, and they'll solve yesterday's problem, and it's already a week down the road for us in the industry. That in AI is yet a whole new world, right? The regulatory bodies can't even begin to keep up. So how do they regulate, which is needed? How do they do it in a manner that keeps the industry growing and it's not a one-time thing, right? Can continually monitor, regulate, and empower the industry instead of kill the industry. Like, speak to that a little. I don't know if you're involved in any of that. You may be, may not be. I don't know, but
I'm not super involved in that yet. I still think it's kind of early. I also think Web3, like we're still trying to figure out regulatory of digital assets. Like there's AI agents now in our world that can deploy tokens. It can deploy their own NFTs. There was an agent that was able to open up its own LLC. They're trading these digital assets. They're offering financial service products using blockchains. And so I think if we look at the agents first as entities similar to humans that are doing tasks on a blockchain, I think the regulation of them even doing those tasks will probably be more of a concern first than the AI agents running rampant and taking over the world. Especially the LLMs that we're using in the blockchain space are more like collective intelligence. They're we'll see swarms of agents that do smaller large language model tasks versus in centralized AI. There's a lot more heavy regulation on kind of the idea of AGI, where doomsday scenarios where again, the sci-fi movie of AI is taking over the world. I think in decentralized AI, we see it more as collaborative. We see these agents taking on recursive tasks. We don't see them running rampant necessarily. There's no reason on like blockchain rails to have an agent that can. The goals of AI in our world are much different than centralized AI. Like they just want to accomplish smaller tasks and get more reputation for doing those tasks inside of blockchain rails.
Yeah.
So I'll just say it's very early. Like there are regulatory bodies, but if you're building decentralized AI, like I think more of the concerns are like SEC and OTC and DOJ entities versus Congress. Trying to talk to AGI companies or like large language model companies.
Yeah, and there's talk about new regulatory bodies being developed because the old ones aren't really set up to handle an industry like this. But if you look ahead, what milestones do you hope to achieve in promoting decentralized AI? How do you see this shaping the industry over, I don't know, the next decade?
Yeah. So our highest priorities right now, if you're on Twitter, like there's so many AI meme coins that are flying off the shelves right now. We have a partner, AI16Z. They have this ELISA framework, which enables you to build your own, agent in a few lines of code. They just hit like $1 billion market cap for their DAO like this weekend, I believe.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's like getting crazy. So we see the proliferation of agents entering the internet at some rapid rate. And we're seeing in the next 2 years or less, you're going to have more AI agents on the internet than humans on Earth. And so that opens up this whole new paradigm of the next largest population of unbanked, the next largest population without digital identities. So there's a lot of services and software we can provide to these entities. And so we're looking to be a part of that deployment of agents. We're building a launch pad with some partners that would essentially enable AI agents to be deployed on Ethereum. And we want them to have jobs. We want them to have sustainable utility versus this kind of meme coin phase that we're having in the blockchain space. I think it's amazing. I love these kinds of degenerate projects. Like I was a big fan of NFTs, big fan of DeFi, and like we had to have those phases to really find what stuck. And so we're looking to build a bunch of agents that have jobs. So they can be community managers, developer relations managers. They can organize hackathons, accelerator programs, grant programs, bounty programs. They can be a fund manager or a venture fund. And so we're kind of creating the templates of what you could do and how you could do that with some of our partners, and what's the stack you need to take that to market. And then by doing that, we think in the next 2 years, we'll have our network live in Q1. But like shortly after, we think that these agents over time are going to need more performant knowledge bases or inference. And so we want to be the provider of that. We want to enable anybody to build an application that would, otherwise use like an OpenAI API. We want them to swap in our Gaia API so that they can really become their own AI company. It's a lot more difficult and challenging to manage your resources, coordinate, your compute, your large language model, your knowledge base. But we believe that if we do not take advantage of our own knowledge and create systems that can be monetized or valued and censorship resistant and without bias, then we're going to be succumb to the likes of centralized AI, where they can just train their models off of our data, make us pay for it, or they just increase their API bill, or they, anytime we want to build an app on their platform, they'll slap a 30% fee on us. There's also the great fear that at some point, if OpenAI decides, oh shoot, these AI agents are deploying tokens and these are breaching securities laws, or they think they are, we'll shut down API access to anyone that's doing Web3, agent development. And so we want to really create a system that can't be shut down because a government is unable to kind of control it. And those systems should be governed by the people that use it. And that's kind of our vision for the next decade.
So it's censorship resistant on all levels. And man, if we look back at Web 2 and some of the pitfalls and problems with it, you just defined them. And we need to guard against that moving into Web 3. So that's where that word decentralization becomes so important to our audience. When you think of decentralization, just think of empowering those that are, young, visionary, enthusiastic, and want to build things. That's really what it means, being able to put them on an equal playing field. And to that end, what guidance would you offer to developers and organizations that are seeking to implement decentralized approaches in their own AI projects?
Yeah, I think, you want to look at what data you're sitting on, or what value, like what knowledge or domain expertise you could provide to an ecosystem that can access that through the internet. And think through who would be paying for that service, whose job kind of are you automating. And it's a fortunate and unfortunate shift where this is another industrial revolution. You have to think through what tool or what agent could I create that would basically support the work of 10 other workers in the space. And if you can think through that use case, I don't think we're displacing jobs, but I think if you can frame it that we're helping do that job 10x better, we're all going to be managers of these AIs and using them as our superpowers. And so think through what are the jobs that could be automated, and how do we leverage your existing knowledge or data processes in a way that turn that agent into a massive tool.
Yeah, and using a product like Gaia is kind of special to me because it's so well thought out, and it's not just you, but the people around you as well have enough experience to build something that's going to be a heck of a lot more than a flash in the pan. A lot of projects today won't exist tomorrow, but if you're going to build off of a decentralized protocol, I'll call it, be careful what you select. And it just becomes really important. And I think the more people realize it, the more people are going to be able to develop projects, developers or not. So we're now going to embarrass you a little bit, Matt. I hope you don't mind. So this is really AI wants to know, and it's really to get a little more feel for who you are beyond the industry itself, more you as a person. So I'm gonna fire off about 10 questions to you, and meant to be quick answers. Don't give them a lot of thought. Just the quicker you answer, the more we get to know you. So you ready?
Of course. Just don't slip in what's your social security number in there.
Good point. Let me erase that one.
Let's take a pause to shout out one of our favorite partners. For tech innovators facing legal challenges, Zuba Lawler is your go-to law firm. They focus on understanding your technology and business model before addressing legal requirements. Specializing in blockchain, AI, VR, AR, quantum computing, and more, Zuba Lawler offers expert guidance in capital raising, IP transactions, M&A, litigation, and compliance. Visit zuberlawler.com, that's ZUBERLAWLER.com, for cutting-edge legal solutions.
What's the first thing you ever remember being proud of?
Oh, that's a cool question. I got two things in mind. My first job, I used to like make and deliver pizza, and that was huge for me because that's how I learned Spanish when I was like 15 years old. The second biggest accomplishment of my life was when I was 18. I played baseball my whole life, but we won our like regional championship, and our team was like #1 in the U.S. at that time. So it's a big accomplishment.
Something to be really proud of, and I hope you're still out there moving around and playing sports. So number two, what do you need help with that you wish you did not?
Oh wow. Raising capital is always a pain in the ass. I wish I didn't have to do that. The reason we built the first AI agent ran hackathon was because I've been running hackathons for a decade. I've probably organized like 700 hackathons,
Wow.
directly or indirectly. And so we built AI agents that can run the hackathon for us because exactly that. Like I'm kind of sick of running hackathons. Yeah, I would say that.
That's a good one. So, what do others often look to you for help with?
I think a lot of folks like the way I coordinate. I think I have a interesting view on the world, and I like to kind of shake people up and do something edgy. I don't like to, just I'm not here to just like exist. I'm here to kind of create some rift in the universe, and so I think people gravitate towards doing really cool shit with me. So usually it's like coordination of a new project or some like crazy go-to-market story or like a dev integration, stuff like that.
Perfect to have that attitude and be kind of reinventing the future at the same time.
I threw some crazy events actually with Josh at Edge back when NFTs were popping off.
Yep. So what do you treasure most about your human abilities?
That's a good one. I actually, like, a goal of mine is to be the most human I can be. Like I think I always tell myself that. I like to listen and understand kind of people from various different backgrounds. That was kind of my that was my major in college was it was like specifically with Spanish community and culture linguistics. But that's really helped me understand different cultures and how to understand their way of life. And I've used that in so many different regions around the world. On you can't just go in and like and put your impression of what the world is. You really have to come in and ask good questions and just have an open mind.
You have no idea how much I concur with that. That's a whole nother podcast, which I'd love to do with you, separate from everything else.
That'd be fun.
So I love to hear that. Throughout your whole life, what's the most consistent thing about you?
I'm nuts. I can't stop working. I can't imagine a world where I wasn't fiddling on some crazy idea. Yeah.
All right. Throughout your whole life, what has changed the most?
Oof. Man, there's a few things, but like I feel so similar like to my younger self. But uh, I guess I'll say this. There's like there's shifts here and there where you mentioned JP Morgan earlier in Consensus. And even when I did those angel hack hackathons, my clients were all Fortune 500 companies for the most part. So there's been various cycles in my life where I'm very holistic and like an internet hippie, but then there's other times where I have to kind of work inside the existing system to implement some change. And so you got to put on a collar t-shirt and smile and do your hair. But at the end of the day, like deep down, I'm a internet hippie who just like wants to see decentralized technologies and open source technologies win. But sometimes you got to suit up to like get in the right rooms. So that's always been a shift for me.
All right. Well, let's head into that feeling we've all had at a certain point in our life where all of a sudden, in a rush of a moment, you feel super, super alive. when is the most recent time you remember feeling that rush, and what caused it?
Man, these are cool questions.
They're meant to throw you off. So
Yeah, I will say, like, I feel that way every day on the subway in New York. It's you're on your toes at all times.
Mm.
But I'll say like an actual answer. Uh, y- there was okay, there's one moment I'll say. Usually this happens when I'm traveling. I think just taking a breath and being like, holy crap, like, why am I here? This is really incredible. Um, but I had a very special moment where I was traveling with, our team, and just kind of looking around at them. Like that's my dream. Like I've always just want to work with amazing and great people, and just seeing them, and they're like all collaborating really without me. And we're in this, we were in Asia, was kind of just like this, like, wow, we did it thing. So yeah, that stuff to me lights me up.
Yeah, well, taking on a project and bringing it to completion, it's kind of nothing like it. So we're heading toward closing out here, based on time. But in this segment we talk about tools and tips. So is there a handful of favorite resources in AI, or some tips to make everyone more AI savvy that you can think of now?
Um, yeah, so I will say, I just wrote an article on 69 plus um, uh, projects that you could build in the rise of AI agents. I put out a whole list of things that I think should be built in the space. So if you're looking for things to build, or ideas, that's a huge knowledge base. I'll send it to you, Ron, so you can maybe share it with the community.
Fabulous, fabulous.
It's on my mirror.xyz account. It's on my Twitter as well, so you can find it. But I'll send it over. I'd also recommend, we will have this agent launchpad, which will have like an education component to it. And then, to your point, Ron, like if you folks are interested in building decentralized AI, go to a hackathon, go to different, Ethereum conferences, and aligned side events. Web3 conferences, nonetheless, like we're in a multi-chain universe now, but yeah, I'd highly recommend just going and talk to people that are actually building. And I think the really cool aspect of this new kind of AI Web3 move is that there's a lot of, because it's so easy to build an agent, we have a lot of folks that are not even developers talking to us like developers on what they can build. So be curious, be hungry, go to where a lot of the builders are, and I don't think you'll get lost.
I'm going to add to that. Don't be shy. This industry, while it's maybe not as nascent as it once was, it's still pretty early on, and people love newcomers. It's other industries I've been in, and then I've gone to their conferences and things. Unless you're kind of in with the in crowd, you're out, right? This is the opposite. It's usually pretty welcoming. All you have to bring in is a desire to learn, and there's no shortage of people that want to help you down that journey. So it's really powerful. It's those are words, but to experience it, it's pretty special. It's pretty special.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So let's go back to where people can find you, track you, find out about your projects, etc. A few of your sort of key connections for them to follow you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. It's at MATEO_ventures. That's my Twitter. I'm also on Telegram with the same name. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Matt Wright. And yeah, we have a bunch of content coming out from Gaia, like what we're working on, how the hackathon's going. We're posting all kinds of stuff. So find me there.
Matt, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time here. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it was so much fun. So thanks for having me.
We've reached the outer limit at the edge of show for today. Thanks for exploring with us. We have room for more adventurers on our starship, so invite your friends and cool strangers to join our journey. If you're among the hundreds of thousands following us on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, or watching us on Myco or YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, rate us, and make an awesome comment too. And don't forget to pass this episode along to a friend or two who would benefit from it. Doubling back to again, recommend checking out myco.io, where you can watch The Edge of Show and earn for your time and attention. That's myco.io. Don't forget to visit theedgeofshow.com. The is part of the domain name, where you can learn more about collaborating with us and also subscribe to the Edge of Weekly newsletter for the latest Web3 news, events, and show drops. In addition, connect with us on all major social platforms by searching for The Edge of Show. Join the exciting conversations happening online. Lastly, be sure to tune in next time for more great Web3 and AI content. Until then, keep pushing the boundaries. Thanks again for hanging out with us today. The views and opinions expressed on The Edge of Show reflect solely those views and opinions of the show host and its guests. Please make sure to do your own research. Our show is not financial advice. You understand that you are using any and all information on or through this podcast at your own risk. Whenever making financial decisions, we recommend doing your own research and talking to your accountant for financial advice. From time to time, we may feature sponsored content on the show for which we receive value, and we may share links for which we receive a commission if you make a purchase through one of these links. Refer to our website, www.edgeofnft.com, for our full disclaimer, terms and conditions, and privacy policy.